Hi, I'm Edwin Tomy. I'm a sophomore undergraduate at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Ms. Federica Montaguti, who is a researcher and product manager at the Center for the International Center of Studies on Ecotourism at the University of Ca' Foscari in Venice, Italy, CISET for short. Ms. Montaguti joined CISET in 2003. She's involved in both the research and in the educational fields of CISET activity. On the research side, her main interests are tourism, destination planning, destination image and brand, cultural tourism, and tourism in the Mediterranean. On the educational side, she's a member of the Teachers Board directing master's program in the economics and management of tourism. She leads the live projects and activities within the same program and coordinates and designs other courses proposed at CISET. She has published many papers and spoken at many conferences. So without further ado, Ms. Federica Montaguti. Hi, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks to you for the invitation. It's a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. So let me just begin by asking you, what differentiates ecotourism from conventional methods of tourism?
Well, there is an official definition of what ecotourism is, and but it's, in my experience, a bit of a problem when you try to apply it to reality and in trying to segment then the general tourist market, and to understand among a series different kind of tourists which group is doing something similar to, or doing really what can be called ecotourism. So in my point of view, it is segments in the market. Ecotourists are segmenting the markets, and not that easy to define when you look at the behavior of people at the destination. And it might get very, very difficult to distinguish ecotourists from other kinds of tourists that are generally interested in the landscape and in nature.
Okay, that's interesting. So can you give us a brief overview of some of the your past research projects, and maybe something you're currently working on right now at your institute?
Yes. In the past, I worked mainly for tourist planning, from the point of view of tourist planning, and dealing mainly with this problem I underlined with ecotourism. So try to really help destination to understand which kind of tourism and tourists they had to deal with when it came to the real consumption behavior and the real behavior at the destination. So much of my research is concern this part. How do we, which kind of approach should we use to really distinguish cultural tourists and the different kind of cultural tourists you might have? Which kind of tourist product are we talking about? Are we dealing with ecotourism or simply like mountain nature tourism, traditional mountain tourism, and so on? This across a series of different kind of tourists and projects. This is one of the things I developed as a research point, because it's really, when you're working directly with the destination and consulting the destination, they need to understand where they should invest, what are the tourists are doing, and one of the main points is that which kind of segments I have now, and what are they doing really at my destination? How can I decide what to do on this basis? And it seems simple, but it is not, because usually you segment tourists on the basis of general motivations, or asking them if they are interested in this or that. But then there is a big difference between what they think they'll be doing, what their aspiration to be doing, and their actual behavior in the destination. And this is one of the major problems with ecotourism, of course, but not only with ecotourism, also with cultural tourism, for example.
Okay, that's interesting. So have you seen the field of ecotourism grow or decline the recent past? And what do you think have accounted for this change?
Well, from the numbers point of view, so let's say the tourist flows, the UNWTO gives ecotourism as one of the most growing sectors, part of tourism. So they give increasing ratio around 7% at a world level for this specific segment. As I said, and also they underline that there is a strong, there are big spenders. And here there is one of the problem, I think, with the definition, because what goes inside is this or under this tag ecotourism seems to be partially ecotourism and partially what is called ecotourism. So people looking for alternative destinations in the world, but not necessarily so interested in preserving the culture and the nature in those destinations. So this 7% might be a little bit, not specific of that, what really the definition is. Even the International Ecotourism Association has changed the definition recently, underlying this aspect, because it was getting very, very ambiguous. But for example, in Italy, the last data we had record a growing interest from international tourists on a green related, let's see, kind of holidays. And so what we call agritourism and this kind of holiday or kind of accommodation.
Okay, thank you for that. So my next question is, so what are some of the difficulties that ecotourism faces? How do you want to differentiate it from, I know you said it was different from cultural tourism, but what really differentiates it? And like, what are some of the difficulties that come with the growth of ecotourism? I know it's been constantly growing for the past, you've said, but like, how do we keep ecotourism, the sector, growing?
Okay, some of the difficulties are that I think entailed in its nature. It's not easy to be responsible and sustainable. One of the problems with the growth of ecotourism might be this. For example, and it is a case that we study here in Italy. The problem you might have with ecotourism is that maybe it was one of the cases we studied. We had a park here not far from Venice, and it seemed that their ecotourist demand was, increasing in number continuously, and so they thought, oh, maybe we might need some more room, more accommodation. But when we tried to study the behavior of the tourists, we found out that ecotourism was just a small part of it, around 3%. The majority of this growing demand was demand that looked for a pleasant area to stay at, but the main motivation was to visit Venice, really. So they were cultural tourists, not ecotourists. And so that's the growing part, and one of the problems might be this: it's not real ecotourism is not so widespread in this moment to sustain alone a destination and a territory or an economy. And this happened, a similar result we had when we studied another part in southern Italy, for example. And if you see the study about Africa, sometimes it comes out that if they had what resulted to them to have so many ecotourists and great success, in the end they found out that they had some impact, unexpected, environmentally unexpected, since you had ecotourism. While on the contrary, when they try to do real ecotourism, community-based tourism and this kind of stuff, the income was not enough for the community to live just on it. So it's not an easy balance to achieve this one. Of course, this growing interest and growing sensibility, I think, will help a more responsible tourism generally, and ecotourism in particular. But you have a similar problem also with cultural tourism when it becomes a sort of mass tourism, and you have the same problem. It's not a natural environment; it's a cultural environment, but you have might have the same kind of problems.
All right. So what kind of incentives do you believe a developing country like Indonesia should do to promote their ecotourism sector? Have you seen any other developing countries try to grow the sector as well? And like, if they did, like, what kind of incentives did they use?
Sorry, I didn't grasp a part of what you said this time.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes the audio was a little bit blurred, so I couldn't.
No worries. I was asking, like, what kind of incentives do you believe a developing country like Indonesia should use to grow their ecotourism sector? They're a developing country, so a lot of their GDP comes from tourism. And have you seen any other developing countries also try to grow their sector?
For developing countries, there is more a problem, because in the situation, there are situations like Indonesia one, where I think it's sometimes very difficult to understand which kind of tourism you have and what is really, fostering your tourism GDP, if it is, and that's not easy, because mainly there are countries, talk about the Mediterranean now, because there are developing economies even there. There have been two kind of policies as far as tourism was concerned before all the crises they faced in the last year. One was the Egypt-like policy, if you like, build as many rooms as you can, and try to attack people with a kind of low-cost offer. Which was sound if you've seen it from their perspective. They had specific problems to solve, internal problems to solve, too many population, too concentrated on the Nile area. It was not like, a decision without any reason. They had reason. And many countries, and not only in the Mediterranean, now I just an example with Egypt, have chosen this kind of development. While there are other countries such as Morocco that for a long time try to target upmarket segments. even in Europe, and so they have very, very high taxes, landing taxes at the airports and this kind of stuff. But they changed recently this kind of policies themselves, because as I said, this kind of balance is not easy to achieve. It's easier when you have other economies that can help you in the development, but it might get very difficult if you depend strongly on tourism, and of course even more difficult, and it might be some cases for you, I think, as well. And I know I studied some cases here in the Mediterranean if you're an island. Okay. Because if you live in an island, you don't have so many alternatives, alternative choices. So sometimes it's like fisheries or tourism. Very often,
a large part
for small islands, of course. For small islands, I'm thinking about Greece and so on. Not that easy.
So what do you think Greece has done though, like as an island country, to promote their ecotourism business?
Well, the development model was kind of similar to the one Egypt adopted later. So, charters and tour operators at the very beginning. Of course, this was partially forced because there were no connections to Crete or Santorini or whatever island we might name. So you have to create a connection specifically for tourism, and this brings you, especially we are talking about the 70s, and this brings you to charter and tour operators. And in time, they were discussing this model because it created really big sustainability problems, starting with water supplies, of course, because in the islands this is one of the biggest problems is water supplies. And so they were looking for a different kind of developing model. They were looking at agritourism, trying to market more the mainland and a little bit the island, and to extend seasonality somehow. Partially some agreement they had with low cost helped, but then they were kind of depending from the low cost. not the only one.
So should you believe that the government should play a role in trying to promote ecotourism, or should it be solely up to the private sector?
No, it surely is one of the responsibility, I think, of the local governments or national governments. It's up to them. This comes from the fact that when we have impacts such as the one I described from Greece, for example, no water or lack of water supplies or not enough water, or the ones you describe, you have in Egypt, a very similar, no water, for example, a very evident problem there. Then the impact goes to all your population. You are naturally involved in this kind of policy, both because you might need to draw more income out of your tourism sector, not only ecotourism, and both because this impacts, in any case, all the population. And the tourists, while they are there, they're basically your population, part of your population. So there's a natural involvement of the public for this, I think. And also because in this moment, as I said, real proper ecotourism is not such a large segment, and so it might be a bit difficult for the private sector to see such return on this kind of investment. Is a typical kind of thing that you have to follow a bit and try to foster from the public point of view. Not necessarily with money, putting money on it, but also using this specific kind of policies. For example, here in Sardinia, it's an island in the Mediterranean, Italian island. At some point, the regional government decided that nobody could build anymore along the coastline. So they put in this regulation to avoid a further extension of resource that needed that would completely ruin their coastline. So sometimes it's not investment, but regulations.
Oh, wow. Very good point. So last question. Could you describe to me what the future of ecotourism might involve? Like, we've seen a growth in ecotourism, and we know its growth is still continuously growing. So what do you think the future might entail? Like, will it become a bigger part of the tourism industry? Will it have the government try to more promote it better? Or will it be solely up to the people to choose to do ecotourism rather than do other forms of tourism?
From what I can see from here, from Italy and for Europe, from Europe, I think that the local and national governments policies will try to support and further enlarge this kind of tourism. It is somehow, if you like, even inevitable for destinations which are, super famous and already mature from the tourism life cycle point of view. And so they try to attract people in different locations, different destinations from the usual one. So in the case of Italy, for example, all the regions, and it's not recent, it's at least 5 to 10 years, they are trying to attract people in the areas just behind the coastline, because we have a lot, of course, of sea resorts and beach tourists, and they are working, and they've been working hard for a long time trying to attract people in the countryside just behind the coastline, and they are having some success now in this, and I think they will go on with this kind of policy because they need to spread the benefits of tourism and at the same time, they need to reduce congestion in some areas. So I think they will go on with this kind of policy.
Okay. Do you want to touch upon anything that you didn't get to touch on before?
Sorry? Can you hear again?
Yeah, no problem. Do you want to talk about anything that you didn't have time to talk about before, the previous questions?
No, I think we get into.
Okay. Well, this has been very helpful. I thank you so much for your time. And
nice to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.